Hey, Iostex here. I am a professional FPS coach and former professional coach for Overwatch League organizations like the New York Excelsior and the Boston Uprising, with now more than 5 years of professional coaching experience under my belt, running the biggest private coaching business over at iostex.com and helping out players for free over on my Discord's Ask Stux Anything channel.
When you had a coupon code in one of your videos, which was expired by the time I got there, but then I saw I think you've apparently lowered your prices a bit from what they used to be, and I was like, oh, this I can definitely afford to pay. Let me do this.
Yeah,
finally.
Unfortunately, small disappointing news. They are unfortunately back up again. Now that Overwatch 2 is coming out soon, I needed to the prices back into the normal range. But you did manage to snag a session before the big price increase came. So you are the second coachee. Or the second MetaFi coachee. So I'm still getting the ropes of how the entire coach interface here works. So you just need to give me one small second so I can find you.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Okay, so you're Daniel, right?
Yes.
Okay, Daniel, you have this one session, and then I guess if I click on here... No, that was definitely not what I wanted to do. Okay, so before we get started, I guess while I try to figure this out, I can just give you the basic disclaimers. First of all, everything that you say, do, or show me during the session is completely confidential. Sometimes if a session is really good, I might ask you at the end of it if it's okay with you to use it for YouTube. But again, that's only with your permission. By default, everything is private. Number 2, I do highly recommend you take notes. I do record this session for you, so you don't have to worry about recording it yourself. I'll be doing that for you. But even though I am recording, I do still recommend you take written notes, just so you have kind of in your own words the concepts and everything that we talk about. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, I've got a pen and paper ready. I like watching your sessions with other people, so I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to take notes.
Very prepared. Ooh, I feel humbled. And then,
well, I am half German, so.
Oh, you are? Do you speak?
Ja, ich spreche Deutsch. Meine Mutter ist von Deutschland.
Oh, nicht
Aber
schlecht.
ich spreche mehr so Haushaltsdeutsch, also deswegen für, weißt du, Gaming kenne ich nicht all die Wörter, also ich habe nicht den Sprachschatz dafür.
Okay.
Deswegen habe ich trotzdem halt auf Englisch gebucht. Ja.
Okay, ja. Kein Problem. This session is just going to be in English, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Okay, no, that's really cool. Actually, your accent isn't bad.
Thank you.
So, the last and final disclaimer is with these sessions, you always get a 1-month coaching pass. I just want to quickly explain what it does.
Okay.
For the next month, so it's based on like the calendar month, so until the 4th of September, you have coaching pass privileges, which basically means if you have any questions, you can spam my DMs full of them. There is no limit whatsoever. And on top of that, you can also send in team fights. So it is limited to 1 team fight per replay code. But if, for example, you play 10 games on a day, you could send me those 10 replay codes and then choose 1 team fight each for me to give you a written review on. Okay? Okay, perfect. So the general way that these sessions are scheduled is that first we'll do a little bit of talking so I can figure out who I'm dealing with here, what your history with playing the game is, and then after that we'll do the very traditional VOD review, pointing out mistakes, all of that stuff.
Okay.
Now, in MetaFi has this default question of like, what are your goals for the session? I didn't put that there, but I couldn't delete it. So I guess it gives me something to work on. So I'll just quickly read through it so you also are on the same page as to what you wrote. You said that your goals are to identify my biggest flaws in how I play Sombra and to generally better understand what my goals should be based on the map and team comps, both mine and the enemies. So that's already really good, being aware that your playstyle changes based on, circumstance. How can I get maximum value when I play her? A specific issue I would like addressed is how to get more value from EMP, as at my low elo, follow-up by the team is hit or miss, even when, I think, I timed it well. People very frequently will blame any bad situation on that Sombra is being played. I know the game is much more complex than that to make such a reductive assessment. very true. But are there situations in which she is truly unplayable and I should definitely switch? I like to focus on one hero at a time and play them in as many situations as possible, rather than defaulting to switching when things get difficult. Bonus question, will you be coaching Overwatch 2, and how long do you estimate until you understand the game thoroughly enough to do so? Because this time I'd rather not wait 5 years. So back to front, regarding Overwatch 2, I'll be coaching that on launch day. So I have extensive periods with the betas, and I'm going to spend extra time familiarizing myself with all of the changes when the game does come out. Ultimately, it's less of an Overwatch 2, it's more of an Overwatch 2.0. I guess it's really just a big patch. So a lot of concepts from the first game still transfer over. So it's really just, kind of like switching from one car to the next. You need to get used to it because it's a little different, but like it's still a car. It still has a gas, it still has a brakes. So everything is kind of similar. So you don't have to worry about that. One question you asked is if there are any situations where Sombra just fundamentally isn't playable. No. So the way that Sombra generates value, we'll go more in depth into this once we go over the replay, just to kind of answer the question right here. There's 3 main ways that Sombra can generate value. So obviously you have the EMP. The second way is just through hacks, and then the last one is through assassinations. Although, in terms of assassinations, of course, Sombra is really just worse at assassinating than Tracer, but obviously her ultimate and her utility is much stronger. And because she has so many different ways of generating value, she is actually very, very kind of comp independent. The only thing that changes is your playstyle. So the first playstyle is kind of the ult focused playstyle. You want to go for the ult focused playstyle whenever you deem it easy to farm up your ultimate very quickly. So the traditional example of this is if the enemy team play, Sigma Roadhog. You just drown an ult charge against that comp. So then you can make farming EMP your main win condition because you'll just get it so frequently. The second win condition is playing off of your hacks. This is really, really good if the enemy team comp is very ability reliant, which is the case for most dive characters. So if the enemy team have a Doomfist, if the enemy team have a Hammond, if they have a Tracer, if they have an Echo, those are all characters where you can basically just sit with your team, wait until they go in, hack them, and you basically just delete them from the game. They're completely useless without their cooldowns. And then the last playstyle is the kind of assassin-y playstyle. Obviously, this is the least preferred playstyle for a Sombra player because you would have just picked Tracer if you wanted to focus on killing people. But sometimes you have to go for it, either A, when a very, very clear opportunity presents itself. So the traditional example is a Zenyatta who's just alone on high ground and you can just 1v1 him easily. Or sometimes you need to go for a pick-based playstyle when the game isn't going particularly well. So your team is kind of, getting stomped a little bit and you feel like you don't really have time to farm up your ultimate and you just need to go for a quick pick. All right, so a good example of this is, let's say there's 30 seconds left on the clock and your ultimate is at 20%. At that point, it's probably better to say, okay, I don't think I'll get my ultimate here, so I'll just run into the back line and see if I can maybe one-clip someone. Does all of that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that is reassuring to know because while I didn't necessarily think of it quite so categorically, that is sort of what I've been going for. I just in recent days discovered I should be when I can't get my assassinations, when there's no EC assassinations, if they're in a little death ball cluster or whatever, then maybe I can just spam damage on tanks and farm ult real quick. And so I've been building EMP so much faster in just even the last week that I've been playing Sombra. And typically when there's they have if I'm at their spawn doors, which I'm usually waiting there, if I see they have a Doom or a ball, it's okay, TP right back to the team, and in this case I'm just gonna stay with the team and farm the Doom and the ball, for instance.
That's pretty much how you should go about it. Obviously the execution is a bit more complex, positioning around it, but yeah, that's the gist of it. Now,
okay.
You did also ask that one issue you have is that you struggle with getting value from your EMP because the follow-up from your teammates at that rating is very inconsistent. So the thing is that your EMP is, you don't, there's two main ways you can use EMP in low elo. The first one is you can use it very selfishly to just get a pick. Again, traditional example, if the enemy team have a Zenyatta, don't bother with looking for a 6-man EMP. Just solo EMP the Zenyatta and one-shot him. And then that pick is more valuable than EMPing 6 people. You know, one kill is so much higher in the value totem pole compared to a pick, compared to hacking people. So that's the first way you can use it. The second way you can use it is to, excuse my language, to cockblock the enemy team. So you basically, so if the enemy team is not a team comp where hack is your primary win condition, right? Let's say the enemy team doesn't play any dive characters and they're more of like a traditional Rhine, Zarya, or Sigma or whatever type comp. In that case, you can look for the moment where the enemy team is committing to an engage. So especially at your rating, sometimes, you know, sometimes a Reinhardt just jumps in really stupidly. Charges in really stupidly. A Winston jumps in really stupidly. A Zarya goes for a really aggressive grab, right? So whenever you get the feeling that the enemy team is going for their big play, you know, they want to be doing something, you can use your ultimate to basically say, oh, you guys just used beat, grab, and rally? Fuck you. You know, and you just press Q and you completely deny their entire engage. So even if your team doesn't capitalize on your ultimate, you're guaranteed value because they don't get value, if that makes sense. So you don't use the EMP to enable your team to do something off it. You just use it to kind of save your team from whatever the enemy team has planned, and in turn give your team just a massive ult advantage, right? For example, one thing that's very common in low elo is that Zenyatas like to use their Transcendence aggressively, right? Or maybe the enemy Moira uses her Coalescence, or the enemy Mercy uses her ultimate, or whatever, right? When you see the enemy team use those ultimates and then they push in very aggressively, a lot of Sombras are hesitant of using EMP when the enemy Zen has Trance. But you shouldn't be, because if you use EMP, sure, you're not going to cancel the Trance, but the rest of the enemy team can't do anything, you know? So at worst, the minimum amount of value that you've generated with your EMP is completely denying the Trance. So even if your team does nothing off the EMP, even if they get 0 kills, 0 space, 0 ult charge, at least you still went even, because the enemy then didn't get anything out of his ultimate either. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that makes so much sense. I never thought of that. And that's, you know, that's one of the frustrating things with Sombra is I feel that's one of those situations where, and not that it like truly matters, but my team won't recognize that I just got mega value, and they'll just be like, Sombra, please switch. That EMP was garbage, right? like I'll now know, like, more than like, well, I will think I know that it wasn't garbage, but you know, either way, like,
really
you know what I mean.
A really morbid analogy is okay. Let's take soccer. You know, you're half German. I'm allowed to use soccer instead of football here.
Yes.
Awesome. So let's say you play soccer. How old are you?
I'm 40.
You're 40. Okay. So let's say you play soccer with a bunch of 8-year-olds. Okay. In that situation, you basically have two options. Option one is you're on the field and you can just micromanage your 8-year-old teammates. You know, tell them what to do, tell them what plays to go for, how to position, passing the ball to them, etc. Right? But that's not really going to do much because they're 8-year-olds, right? So what you can do instead, as harsh and morbid as it might sound, is you can just fuck the enemy 8-year-olds up. You know,
right?
You can tackle them, you can outplay them. You basically just abuse the fact, instead of trying to enable your team, you try to abuse your superiority over the enemies in skill to just completely shut them down. Instead of thinking about, okay, my team sucks, you know, how can I make them suck less? Your approach should be, my team sucks. how can I make sure the enemies suck more?
Yeah. That is such a. I love that illustration because I've kind of gotten that vibe from some of your other videos where you're always saying, like, don't give the other team respect unless they earn it. Treat your team as bots. Like, don't rely on someone else. Like, rely on yourself. But this is like a really that like really brings it home, illustrating it with the with the 8-year-olds in soccer. That makes so much sense. Like, you wouldn't be trying to tell your team what to do. You would just be abusing the fact that you're 3 times the size of the of the other 8-year-olds.
Exactly. And if you're not 3 times their size yet, then that should be your priority. Getting bigger, becoming a better player. It's kind of a bit of like a paradox, because in order to actually play like a high-level player, you need to believe that you can play like a high-level player, but you only believe that you can do that if you've actually done it before, right? Which is why it's so important that you go into each game with the mindset of, okay, I'm good at the game. I think I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to play that way. I'm not going to play like these players are my equals. I want to play as if I am better than them. Because that's what we want to practice. We don't just want to practice fitting in and not being a burden and not feeding and getting carried. We want to learn how to be that player where, our team just loves having us on the team. This is something that I like telling main tank players very frequently, for example. There's so many Reinhardt players who talk about, like, I can't do anything because my supports just, never heal me, so I can't play aggressive and whatever. But the mindset there should be when a bronze support duo have a top 500 Reinhardt player on their team, the game feels like autopilot for them. Because the average bronze Reinhardt player is eating billions of damage each second, so they basically have to just tunnel all of their healing into him, and then the rest of the team dies around them. Whereas the top 500 Reinhardt player, he can generate as much value as the bronze Reinhardt, if not even more, while taking a fraction of the damage, and thus taking a fraction of the healing resources for themselves, which just alleviates a lot of pressure from the supports and leaves more healing for the rest of the team, which means that they don't die as much, and they can get away with making more plays.
That's brilliant, because I actually am a main tank player. Sombra's like my first DPS that I'm taking seriously. And while I typically have avoided Rhine, I mainly play Winston. That has been when I do play Rhine, or when some of my, friends who are around my level as well, like when we're playing and they play Rhine, it's always that complaint, like, oh my god, like there's just never enough heals. What are they doing? Why don't we have an Ana? Like all that stuff. And it's like what you just said makes so much sense.
Yeah, don't worry too much about what other people, especially in your games, tell you to do. You should be doing this, you should be picking this character. You need to trust that you know what you're doing, or at least you know what you want to do, right? Obviously, sometimes we might have misunderstand how we should play in a given situation. Maybe playstyle A is technically correct, but we go for playstyle B. You need to just stand by your decisions, because that's the only way you can improve, if you can hold yourself accountable. If you just do what your teammates tell you to do, let's say they tell you don't swap off Sombra, right? Then you don't really get any feedback on your own decision. You would just go Tracer because it's their decision. And then if the game goes well or if the game goes poorly, it's almost like you're improving for them. It's like a vicarious improvement almost. But we don't want that. We want to decide, okay, this is what I want to do. And then I'll see if it works or not. I look at the results, and then I know if I need to do something different next time or not. Okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I like that.
Now, the next thing I quickly want to talk about is how much time can you put into the game on a weekly basis?
Well, Overwatch is kind of my main hobby. Every now and again, I'll play another video game for a little bit, but generally I always go back to Overwatch, and that means as soon as I have free time in the day. I mean, I have a business and I go to school, but I generally still probably fit easily 2 or 3 hours in per day.
That is
sometimes more. Yeah. Sometimes more.
Yeah. So a good rule of thumb is 14 is kind of the bare minimum. And okay, so here's how you need to look at this. As you play the game, you become more and more warmed up. most people, depending on how much they deliberately warm up, so some people warm up by just playing ranked. Some people have like a dedicated warm up with deathmatch or aim trainers or whatever. But most people need around 2 hours until they're in the zone, or maybe you've heard flow state before, even though I think that term is a little not my favorite. But yeah, so it takes around 2 hours to really get to that peak, which means that going from 2 hours to 3 hours, that is actually the biggest jump that someone can make, because that 1 extra hour is like the marginal rate of improvement is just highest with that hour. If you look at like a graph, that's like the fucking peak of the marginal rate of improvement. That hour is more useful than everything else.
And when does it start to taper off again?
So for most people, the 2 to 5 hours, so that time range is like kind of the peak. So 2 to 3 is like perfect. Then 3 to 4 is like 90% of perfect, and then after that it starts to taper off very quickly, because at that point, after 4 hours, most people just get a little, I'd rather be doing something else right now. And I mean, obviously, 4 hours is a very significant amount of time, so not a lot of people put in more than 4 hours, which means that, because you just don't really gain that much out of it. Obviously, once you start scrimming with a team or something, you can get more out of additional playtime. That's why pros play, 8 to 12 hours a day. But for the average player, what I usually recommend to people is like 2 hours is the absolute minimum. If you play less than 2 hours a day, trying to pursue the game competitively is just going to be really frustrating. 3 hours is like that sweet spot. It's not perfect yet, but you get a lot of value out of your time, and you can climb at a steady pace, at least up until Masters. And then 4 hours, that's like, basically, if I were to take a game serious competitively, if a new game came out and I said, I want to reach the highest rank there, then, to be honest, 4 hours would be the amount of time that I would put in, because that's the perfect sweet spot between still having time for other stuff and getting the most out of every single minute you invest into the game.
That's really interesting.
Okay, now ultimately, how much time you invest is a very personal thing. It can change on a weekly basis depending on what else is going on in your life. But just being aware of these factors is really nice, because, for example, sometimes, let's say you said you run a business, let's say you need to do some fucking, accounting stuff, sorting through bills, and that's going to take you an hour, right? So it would be better to schedule that in a way that allows you to maybe take a day off from playing the game, just not playing at all, getting that work done. But then the next day, instead of being able to only play 2 hours, you can play 3 or 4 hours on that day, because then those extra hours are just more valuable, right?
Yeah.
Instead of playing 1 hour on the first day and then 2 hours on the next, like you really want those nice high quality practice chunks. And while taking off days has negative effects in terms of mechanics, like you do get a little rusty whenever you take an off day, taking a break can be really good for your mental overall. And if you have a good warm-up routine as a DPS player, then you'll just warm up right through all of the rust that's accumulated, and you'll be back in shape. Now the final yeah.
Oh, may I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So those 2 hours of warm-up, would those include, so I've recently started getting actually interested in improving my aim, because I realized it's not good, and I can do so much more of Sombra as it's improving, which I've already noticed.
Yes.
So I started using Kovacs to improve my aim. I don't want to do too much of it, so I'm doing like 15 to 30 minutes per day before I start playing. And then I try to do a few matches of deathmatch. So I can work on 1v1s and actual like in-game true aiming before I start doing any other like the normal mode. So it does that time count for my 2 hours or no?
Yes. So the 2 hour metric to warming up is like a total number. If you spend an hour just playing deathmatch, you would also be warmed up, but obviously that's not very time efficient, just grinding deathmatch in terms of improvement, unless mechanics are a big bottleneck. 2 hours is more like the cap, like even if someone doesn't warm up, even if someone hasn't played the game in a week, after 2 hours, at least mechanically, they're going to be in a pretty good spot. But
I see.
Yeah, if you warm up, if you do a nice 30-minute warm up, if you want to, we can actually create a quick warm up routine in a bit. Then you can be warmed up at least mechanically in like 20 to 30 minutes. And then the only thing that you need to warm up for the remaining time is kind of your intuition of the game. Developing an intuition for when your shield breaks as Ryan, or for what fights you can take, or spotting EMP opportunities. But just warming up mechanics can be done in like 30 minutes if you have a good routine.
Okay, great.
Okay, so what's your warm up routine right now?
Yeah, so right now I'll do, like I mentioned, I do kovacs, and I have a number of scenarios that, mainly they're tracking scenarios to help me improve my tracking ability, but I have some actual flick scenarios on there because of the importance, at least as I understand it, and have noticed now the difference, of initial crosshair placement. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to be more conscientious of make sure the first shots I'm getting, 1, land, and 2 are preferably headshots. Mm-hmm. And then track from there. So that's why I have like a mix of those scenarios in kovacs. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I do like maybe 15 to, I just added a few more routines. So maybe it's between 15 and 30 minutes that those kovacs routines are happening. Okay. Then I switch, and if there's deathmatch available, I always do deathmatch while I'm waiting for my matches, but like if there's deathmatch in arcade, then I'll do maybe 2 or 3 games. Like you can kind of feel when it's starting to flow. So I'll do 2 or 3 games of that, and then I'll play. I'm calling it normal mode. The reason I'm calling it that is because I don't know how you feel about. Truth be told, I mostly play quick play.
Okay.
I know most people that look for coaching are like really all about climbing specifically in their rating. I've never really cared that much about like the actual number. I care more about feeling when I'm playing like I know what I'm doing, and like I'm contributing well, and like I'm playing appropriately. I play mostly with just different online friends in quick play. Sometimes I solo queue, and every now and again, like I did play a little bit of comp because I wanted to see, like my DPS rating from comp was from when I first started Overwatch, and like didn't even understand how a team shooter works. I came from just a, Half-Life, was my shooter in, like just it doesn't matter how many times you die, just shoot, spray and pray, it doesn't matter. I didn't even realize until 250 hours into Overwatch that, I should try dying less. That's actually useful. Like, truthfully, like, I didn't notice any of the, like, meta principles. All I knew was shoot gun, So, so my rating was in the toilet, and I thought, okay, perfect. I have a super low rating. I can now, like, evaluate how does my Sombra compare if will I climb with this low rating? So I played a little bit of last season and climbed 100 points, which I know isn't like phenomenal, but I also didn't play all that many matches. I'm just like, I don't know, for some reason to me, comp is like extra pressure that I most of the time don't feel like doing. I just want to enjoy the game. Right? But I want to be better at the game. Like I want to play it casually, but also get better at it. If that makes sense.
I get that. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack. I can tell that this is going to be a very, a session that's very focused on talking, because there's a lot of stuff we need to cover. So before we move on to the quick play thing and everything, I just want to finish off the warm up. I have 2 questions regarding your warm up. The first one is, do you prioritize speed or precision, and do you visually focus on the crosshair or your targets?
Oh, interesting questions. So I am focusing on precision because I felt my aim was just terrible. Like I would always over aim and stuff like that. And so I thought, okay, if I can't do this slowly, then I can't do it quickly. So let me focus first on making these movements with my crosshair in very straight lines, because they were wiggly, make them as straight as possible, and like where they land precisely on the target.
Yes.
So I actually slowed down all the scenarios to 50%, so that I could like do them more controlled. Let's see. What was the second question again?
Do you focus visually with your eyes on the crosshair or on the target you're trying to hit?
Oh, okay. So I have read that if your target is a far distance, you should focus on the crosshair, and if it's closer, you should focus on the target. I feel like there's some truth to that, but I've been more leaning toward focusing on the target, especially because with tracking, like I feel like my reactivity, I think that's the like official term, isn't great. And I've noticed if I'm focusing more on the target, that improves. And also I noticed I tend to go easily into like an autopilot mode, especially in quick play when you're talking with friends and you're not like necessarily like hyper focused. And I think you can easily, well me anyway, shoot at nothing. Like you think you're shooting at something, you're kind of shooting at it, but you're actually completely missing.
Yeah.
You know, when you watch the VOD reviews, you end up seeing like, oh my god, what was I actually aiming at? Nothing. And part of that, which I know this isn't exactly what you asked, but part of it is I always just assumed I can't aim well.
Okay.
And it wasn't until literally a few weeks ago that I decided, no, I'm really going to try to do this. And my accuracy instantly started improving. I started getting way more headshots. Like I'm constantly hearing dings, which before I also felt like I can't hit headshots because one, it's too hard, so I'm not going to bother. And two, I can't, if this makes sense, like I don't mean this literally, but like I can't see people's heads. Like I feel like the game is too small and too, the colors, it's just like hard for me to just see the people's heads enough to just focus on them. But for some reason, magically, once I decided I'm going to start trying to do headshots more, I'm just getting more headshots. So all that is to say, I think focusing on the target is really, really important. And if I'm not doing it, I'm missing a lot more.
So your intuition...
Sorry if that was more than you wanted to know.
It's okay. So your intuition there is very correct regarding the where to look question. So I haven't heard of the distinction between long distance and close distance. You should just look at the target, period. The reason why that is very important can actually be explained very simply. If I throw a ball at you and you want to catch it, do you look at your hands or the ball?
Ooh, what a great illustration. You look at the ball. Exactly. And you know why this is so meaningful to me? Why? It wasn't until I was probably 25 years old that I finally understood what people meant when they said, look at the ball. Like, I was so bad at catching.
Yeah.
And I finally realized, oh, you're supposed to actually look directly at the ball and follow it to your hands. Like, I would just kind of generally look out there. And, like, I'm aware of the ball, but I never tracked it with my eyes. Yes. That was a huge revelation.
Yes. So the crosshair in this case is the, the catching, the head receptacle. And you need to get the head into the head receptacle, which is the crosshair.
Yes. Wow.
So do you know what the term proprioception means?
Yes.
Okay. So... quick refresher, proprioception is just our innate sense of where our body parts are, so we don't need to have our eyes open to know where our hand is, right? And that's proprioception is key when it comes to catching a ball. That's why we don't need to look at our hands in order to catch the ball, because our brain knows where our hands are without looking at them. But our brain doesn't know where the ball is without looking at them. So by looking at our hands, we're basically giving our brain information it already has. And the same thing happens in-game. So when you play shooters, very often, you develop proprioception for the center of your screen, which is the reason why some pro players don't actually lose any accuracy when they disable their crosshair. To them, finding the center of their screen is as intuitive as you knowing where your hand is relative to your body, right? Because they've just played games for such a long time. So by developing that proprioception for the crosshair, they can look at the target and they they just know what kind of movement they need to make in order to get their crosshair on the target, which neatly brings us into the next point. So this is where your intuition wasn't quite right, and it's the speed over precision question. So focusing on precision in aim trainers is great if you want to focus on improving your score within aim trainers. But when you use an aim trainer as a warm-up, our goals are very, very different. When we use it as a warm-up, we just want to get our wrists, our arms kind of loosened up. We want to get our brain just up to speed, right? Kind of wake up, become a little bit more alert. So we want to prioritize speed over precision, and the precision comes over time. Now, the reason why that is important is because aiming, both tracking, right, when you need to react to the target switching directions, and flicking, at high levels of play, those are reflexes. So if someone goes for a flick, right, he's not aware of the distance between his crosshair and the target. He doesn't have time for that. He just sees the target's head, his eyes just dart to it, and then out of reflex, his brain makes the hand movement that puts that head into the center of his screen. Right? So it's a reflex. And the problem is when you focus too much on precision, then it's no longer a reflex. It kind of becomes this very deliberate, conscious action that you make. Which, again, if you want precision, that can be really, really good. But games don't actually reward precision. So especially Overwatch, right? Overwatch is a game where usually you're either very close to a target or headshot hitboxes in general are just kind of massive, right? So you very, very quickly reach a point where the reason you don't land your shots isn't actually because you weren't precise enough, but rather because you weren't quick enough. The reason why you failed to track the target is because he strafed into the opposite direction, and it took you too long to adjust and change what direction your crosshair is moving. The reason you missed your flicks is not because you didn't hit the area you wanted to hit. It's just that you were too slow. So by the time you actually complete the flick, the target you want to hit has already moved a couple pixels further, and your shot misses. Right?
Wow.
So that's why it's important that when you practice, you really, really want to prioritize speed, because what this does is it's a process called desensitization. It's basically the reason why we can't smell our noses. When a certain stimulus becomes super duper repetitive, our brain stops consciously processing it. So when our flicks just become so super fast and you just do them over and over and over again, your brain does them without thinking about them. When a bee or a mosquito buzzes by your ear, you don't process that it's a mosquito. You don't look at the mosquito. You don't think about how you're going to move your arm. It just, as a reflex, darts up and smashes your ear and gives you third grade tinnitus. But that's the same thing with aiming. When we aim, we don't think. We just look at the target, and it feels like just very intuitive, like an extension, like as if our arm is in the game and we just need to point at the target with our arm. That's what it feels like when we desensitize to the speed the game is played at. And by maximizing the speed at which we aim, right, our brain gets desensitized to that pace, and the game quite literally just feels like it's running in slow motion. One amazing way that you can see this firsthand. Every single time someone has done this, their mind was fucking blown. Go into a custom game and just add a few bots to the enemy team, like 2 or 3 Zenyatas or something, and then go into the settings, reduce all of the damage numbers so that you can't kill anything and they can't kill you. And then increase the movement speed to 200%. And then put on a podcast, put on your favorite playlist, and for 45 minutes, just try to track those targets as Sombra or Tracer, while both you and the bots have 200% movement speed. And when you do that for 45 minutes, I shit you not, you'll literally find out a way to like send me cake. because it's kind of a way to. It's only temporary, right? So obviously that desensitization that you experience through this 45-minute high intensity training, it desensitizes you very quickly, but obviously it's not permanent. The way you become permanently desensitized is by doing it consistently over a long period of time. But when you switch the movement speed back to 100%, you'll think your game is bugging out. It'll feel like the game is running in slow motion, and it'll basically feel like you have an aimbot. It's going to be completely trivial landing headshots. And that is basically, it kind of gives you an insight into what it'll feel like being really, really good at the game. It's kind of a little teaser, so to say, which can be super duper motivating for people. Okay.
This is a revelation. Well, so when I'm doing my Kovacs scenarios,
yes,
like I have this whole grand plan in my mind that every week I would increase it by 10% till I'm like at the full speed, and then maybe even go beyond the full speed. Should I completely skip that and go right to full speed, and then even start working to go beyond the full speed?
So one method that I like recommending is the zigzag method, where you basically start at a higher speed. So you start at like 120%, and then you go down to 100%. And then you go up to 140%, and then you go down to 120%. And then you go up to 160, down to 140, up to 180, down to 160. So you basically kind of zigzag your way. You alternate between, oh, this is much faster than before, and oh, this is actually slower than before. Does that process make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Okay,
so I don't have to worry. Like, I'm just so worried that, like, all right, when I'm doing it, what if I'm just missing everything because it's too fast and I can't hit it? Like,
that's what the zigzag is for. So if you're at 120% speed, sure, maybe you'll miss a bunch for like 20 minutes. But after that, you'll go down 20%, you'll go down to 100%, and now you're desensitized. All of a sudden, the 100% is going to feel really slow in comparison, and you'll be able to perform well there. So it's almost like you're warming up for the warm-up.
Okay.
And then you rinse and repeat that process.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Now, okay, so here's the thing. I need to have like a quick little talk with you. We have around 20 minutes left in the session. There are two more things that I wanted to discuss before we go over the replay code. Mainly your roles and the whole quick play thing. But if we do that, I don't think we'll have time to go over a replay code. So what do you value more? Going over a replay code, or kind of just continuing the conversation to make sure that everything outside of the game is Gucci?
Well, here's the great thing. I bought 2 sessions right away. Ooh. I only booked the one, and I kept the other for just, we'll see what happens, right? So what we could do, well, you tell me how you think those can then best be utilized. What we could do is just talk for the rest of this session, and then I can book the next one, and then we can use that one for doing the review. In fact, I don't know if you think this is a stupid idea or not, you tell me. In preparation for this, I VOD reviewed the game that I sent you. As I watched it, I was embarrassed, and I was like, because I've been doing my own VOD reviews, and I was like, this is so awful. Even without knowing, like, maybe the higher level stuff that I couldn't see, I can already see everything terrible that I did here. I was valueless and terrible. Of course, it was a difficult situation for low level players. I convived with, Symmetra, car wash, and all that stuff. So, but either way, I thought, okay, do I want IOStux to evaluate a game that I already know is bad and I could tell you 10 things I did wrong? Or have another replay code that I didn't give you where I felt I played really well, except for maybe 2 mistakes. 2 mistakes that I think could have turned the tide of the game, but I feel like, well, it shouldn't come down to just those 2 mistakes. Clearly, I made 20 other mistakes that I'm not capable of seeing, where we would have never been down to, if I mess up this one thing, we lose the game because the rest of the team can't do anything. So I would have almost rather had you review that game with me. So if we did the next session for VOD reviews, could we maybe even look at both games? A game where I know I played poorly and a game where I think I played well.
Sure. Okay, then we can just quickly finish the talk on the last two topics, and then we can do the full-on proper VOD review in the next session.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Okay, awesome. So, right, the first thing is, and I need to know a little bit more about your ambitions within the game, because you said that you're kind of a quick play aficionado, and you like playing with friends. So I guess what is your ultimate goal within the game? What do you want to get better for?
Okay, so I just want it for my own satisfaction. I like I've actually had, because I had a few revelations just from watching a few of your recent videos, and they actually immediately improved my play over the last just 2 weeks. So in the last 2 weeks, I've had so many games where I just felt, and this was both wins and losses, where I felt, this game, it felt great. I knew what I was doing the whole time. I felt like I was getting tons of value. I was getting assassinations. My EMPs were good. My hacks were perfectly timed. This felt great. I had flow. I was just in control. And we lost for whatever factors that are unimportant, or we won, and I just want to feel capable as I'm playing. I want to feel like I know what I should be doing, rather than oh God, I don't know what to do. Those situations where it's I just don't know what to do here. Nothing's working. I want as little of those as possible. Even if it's what I'm trying to do isn't working, I still want to at least know this is what I should be trying to do. Or I did the best I could with what I had, and these factors are what prevented, it fully from realizing into a win, but at least I know I did what I should have been doing. If that makes any sense. My goal is I want to just continually grow as a player and be a better player, regardless of whether I'm silver, plat, or grandmaster. And maybe I'll do some more comp just to get maybe a numerical evaluation of how I'm doing. I noticed with Winston, because I was silver level tank as well, and then I had learned Winston. I put several hundred hours into him, and I'm let me see how good my Winston really is. And it was so easy. It was easy up until plat. Up until plat, the game felt like child's play, whereas before it didn't. So there I knew, okay, this was a really good litmus test for where I truly stand, because it started to not be easy anymore once I was in plat. So maybe I'll use comp in that capacity in the future, but it's not my, the rating isn't my main concern. I just want to know that I'm playing skillfully.
So the main reason why comp is good is not really because it gives us a rating. That's not the main issue. The main problem with quick play is kind of in the name, quick play. The reason it's called quick play is because it prioritizes queue times over creating a competitive environment where both teams are of an equal skill level. And this kind of matchmaking can become even more difficult when you play with players of varying skill levels. So maybe you're doing really well, right? You said those games below plat, they felt really easy at first, right? So maybe you're doing really, really well, but one of the people that you queue with is actually doing really poorly. He's been on a massive loss streak. So now the both of you go into quick play, and even though you are ready to play against a higher caliber of opposition, the average MMR of your stack is going to be lower, and because it's quick play, it's not going to worry too much about creating a balanced experience in the first place, which means that most likely you're either going to be under-challenged because the enemies are just so much worse than you, or you're going to be over-challenged because your teammate is going to be, not performing very well, and you need to play in a very peculiar way to try and make up for his weaker performance. So the point being is that the reason why comp is so highly recommended when you want to get better at the game, especially solo queue comp, is because it gives you a consistent, valid environment to improve in. So there was this really cool Veritasium video that I watched, and it was about how to improve. And one thing he mentioned is that Warren Buffett, like an investor, he made a bet, that over 10 years he could make a better investment than any of the big, McKinsey, hedge fund, whatever companies. And And so someone took him up on the bet, and he invested into like 200 different hedge funds. And Warren Buffett, he just invested evenly into the fucking top 100 companies, you know? Like, just blanket. He didn't give a shit what those companies were. He just put his money in there. And he completely stumped the other guy. You know, the other guy was really, really meticulous and everything. And, you know, Warren Buffett said, oh, you know, like, it's fucking stocks, dude. Just put it into the successful companies and you'll make money. And the reason why those stockbrokers, because you would think if you just sit at a stock exchange all day, eventually you would get good at it, you know? How can they not predict how the market is going to develop with all of that experience? And the reason for that is that stock exchange is not a valid environment. On the short term, those stock fluctuations are very inconsistent. So sometimes you can do something correct. You can make a logically sound investment, but random market fluctuation just fucks you over. Or you can make a bad investment and you can just get lucky, right? So it's actually, they're not really experts, you know, they have a bunch of experience, but because it wasn't really gained in a valid environment, right? They're not experts in the way that a pianist is an expert, right? He gets very valid feedback. If he presses the wrong key, it sounds like shit, right? So they have a much easier time getting an expert. And the problem with quick players, it's not a very valid environment because you can make really good decisions, but still end up losing because the matchmaking just didn't favor you. Or you can play very poorly, but perform really well in game, you know, get really good results and feel like you have very high impact because the enemies just aren't as good. So the main reason why comp is so good is because it's the closest thing to a valid, consistent environment that we can get, where if we play well, we should be able to notice that, and if we play poorly, we should be able to notice that. And that's how we slowly improve over time, by making changes to our playstyle and then monitoring how that affects our results in game, how the outcome of team fights. And then using that feedback to adjust, you know, what things do we want to incorporate into our thought process and which playstyles maybe don't work as well. Does all of that make sense?
A lot of, yeah, that resonates on so many levels. One side question regarding this that's completely random that we may not hit is I noticed in, well, basically all of your videos, I think you even have a specific one on this, you say turn off chat because it's worthless. Well, you know all the reasons. Now, I love that idea. I'm just scared with, like, I thought, like, Sombra is a very, like, well, I thought is a very communication heavy character. Like, she's really good at seeing when people are flanking, knowing when enemy ults are happening, you know, and then timing EMP, which of course you just went over with me, like, why I don't need to worry about that. But, like, is it going to be very detrimental to turn off chat as Sombra?
No. Any information you share with your team isn't going to be properly utilized. Any information that's shared with you, which doesn't happen that often to begin with, but any information that's shared with you is unreliable or might just not be valuable in the first place. They might just be sharing stuff that isn't relevant to you whatsoever. Which means that in lower ranks, the quality of voice comms just is basically always detrimental for you. It's just never worth it. Once we get to around masters, that's where people have like a decent understanding of the game. That's where at least listening in on the comms can be beneficial. And then actually communicating yourself, contributing to voice comms, that's something that you can do usually around 4K plus, because then you have very consistent, reliable teammates, and communicating becomes a very big part in winning games. But if we go back to the analogy earlier, the soccer with the 8-year-olds, you need a lot of communication if you want to micromanage them and try to help them out. We don't need communication to kick a bunch of 8-year-old opponents in the balls.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you know what? Every time I call a flanker, the supports get killed anyway because no one does anything. Exactly. Every time I say, okay, I'm going to EMP this fight, all right, 3, 2, 1, nothing happens. Like, the only communication I get back consistently is, dude, get off Sombra.
Yeah, it is not worth it whatsoever.
Oh.
Okay. And then there's only one last topic, and then you shall finally be released. And that's the role situation. So right now you said that you are not currently focusing on one role exclusively, correct?
Oh, you mean as in like DPS tank or support?
Yeah.
So I had dedicated myself to being a pure tank for the last many hundreds of hours, and I considered myself a tank player. In fact, mainly a main tank player, because I knew the value of specializing in one role. But I kind of got a little bit burnt out, and I've wanted to try Sombra since I first touched the game. I just always thought, she's too hard for me, I can't do that. And then something just inspired me recently that's like, you know what? Just try it, man. And I'm having so much fun, so now I exclusively play DPS.
Okay, perfect. Well, that was a very short conversation then. Because, yeah, it's basically impossible to be competitive as a DPS player if you dilute your playtime with tank gameplay. That's basically all I wanted to say, but I guess that talk has been talked. No need to go any further in it. Okay, well, I mean, I've basically covered everything I wanted to cover. We are, in terms of timing, it's pretty much perfect. Do you have any final questions?
No, I would say that that's already a lot of food for thought and a lot to think about. How will I access the recording that you made for me?
So that depends on how you answer the next question. If you are fine with the session being used for YouTube, you'll get a Google Drive link. If you don't want it to be uploaded publicly to YouTube, it's uploaded to YouTube unlisted, so only you'll be able to watch it, but no one else.
So either way, YouTube would be the channel to get
Pretty much.
to it.
I mean, okay. Yeah, I just don't have the storage. Like, I don't have an own custom coaching session server hosted in my.
No, I think that's perfect, and that's easier for me because I was worried I was gonna have to download it, and I have a slow internet connection. So okay, excellent.
If it's used for a video, you should probably download it because the video actually no, you don't. Basically, the videos that are put into the Google Drive, they stay there until they're used in a YouTube video. So once they're deleted from the Google Drive, you can just use the YouTube video that it's used in, basically.
Okay. Yeah, and for reference, I mean, I'm sure this type of a session, an hour of black screen isn't really going to be used for YouTube, but
an hour of Night Mercy main menu screen.
Oh, yes. So yeah, for reference, you can use anything from our sessions on YouTube. I'm more than happy to. I think that would actually be super cool. And anything that can help other people, I think would be awesome, to share. So I have no qualms about you sharing anything you want from this session or any of our future sessions.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Okay, well, then as I mentioned at the start, you have the 1 month Coachee Pass. Obviously, that month refreshes when you have your next session, so any questions you want to ask, any team fights you want me to look at, send them over. The way that MetaFi does it, this wasn't actually my idea, but I don't think it's a bad idea, so I guess I'm going to pitch it. Basically, what they do is once your session is done, they give you the option to do like a video testimonial of the session. It's basically like a short little review. You don't have to do that, but if you do it, you actually get a 25% discount code that you can use on any future order. So if you feel like you might want to get a session in the future, or if you just like the session and you want to help me out, a testimonial is always super duper appreciated. You'll also get a summary of the session on MetaFi as well. So you can kind of we talked about a lot, but you can just check. Maybe you missed something in your notes that's going to be in the summary. And I'll need to free up some space on my Google Drive so I can get this uploaded there. And then as soon as that's done, I'll send it over to you. If you don't have it by tomorrow, please send me a message and I'll get that sorted right away. Any final questions?
No questions. I just want to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. I honestly, and this isn't me trying to, I don't even remember the word now. Shower you with praise, but basically, I think you're hands down the best coach like on YouTube. Your videos have your teaching style, like you have such an understanding of pedagogy and learning, and it's amazing how much you understand teaching and coaching, not just the game of Overwatch. And then your understanding of the game of Overwatch is also like so crisp and simple and clear, and I love that you're direct. I know a lot of people don't like that, but hey, we're both German, so maybe that's why.
Heck
But
yeah.
I just think I think you do amazing work, and that's why I'm just so happy I got to have this session with you, and I'm really looking forward to our next one.
I really appreciate the kind words. Okay, well then, yeah, if you want to do a video testimonial, it would be appreciated. And if you need anything else from me, my DMs are open.
Okay, thank you,
Awesome.
IOStocks.
No problem. Have a good one. See ya.
Yeah, have a nice night. See you next time.